She clutched her pearls as her son walked through the mahogany doors, but when her eyes fell on the simple silver chain around the young woman's neck, everything she thought she knew about family, loss, and love shattered in an instant. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're ready to experience a story about love, loss, and the most shocking family discovery you've ever heard, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because tomorrow I've got another heart-stopping tale that will leave you speechless. Some stories change everything in a single moment. Some necklaces hold secrets that can heal 23 years of heartbreak, and some families find each other in the most impossible ways. Now let us begin with a story that proves love really can conquer anything. Victoria Ashworth's manicured fingers traced the rim of her bone china teacup as she stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows of her Beacon Hill mansion. 23 years. 23 years since she'd lost her daughter, and still, every autumn morning felt like that terrible October day when little Isabella had simply vanished. The Persian rug beneath her Italian leather heels had cost more than most people's cars, yet it couldn't cushion the weight of her grief. She'd built walls around her heart, walls made of charity galas, country club memberships, and the kind of perfectionist mothering that had driven her remaining child, Christopher, to rebellion at every turn. Mrs. Ashworth, the housekeeper's voice was gentle but insistent. Master Christopher called. He's bringing someone for dinner tonight. Victoria's grip tightened on her teacup. Someone? A young lady, ma'am. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Victoria had spent years perfecting her world, controlling every guest list, every introduction, every relationship that might threaten the carefully constructed life she'd built from the ashes of her loss. Christopher, now 25 and fresh from his MBA, had been her project, her second chance at getting motherhood right. What do you think drives a parent to control their adult child's relationships? Have you ever seen love disguised as protection? Share your thoughts below. Sometimes the hardest bonds to understand are the ones closest to home. Meanwhile, across town in Roxbury, Jasmine Cole sat on the edge of her twin bed in the apartment she shared with her grandmother, nervously adjusting the delicate silver necklace that never left her throat. Her reflection in the cracked mirror showed a young woman of 22, with warm brown skin that seemed to glow despite her anxiety, and eyes that held both determination and vulnerability. "You sure about this, baby girl?" Her grandmother, Nana Ruth, shuffled over with arthritic hands that still managed to perfect Jasmine's collar. Rich folks, they got their own ways. Jasmine's fingers found the small pendant on her necklace, a silver locket tarnished with age but polished with love. Inside was the only photo she had of her mother, a woman she'd never known but whose memory lived in every story Nana Ruth told. "Christopher's different, Nana. He sees me, really sees me." The words came out stronger than she felt. They'd met at the community center where she volunteered teaching kids art therapy, where Christopher had shown up one day with a corporate grant check and stayed for her smile. 6 months later, he'd become her anchor in a world that often felt determined to wash her away. But tonight was different. Tonight she was stepping into his world. "Your mama would be proud," Nana Ruth whispered, kissing her granddaughter's forehead. "That necklace, it's got power, baby girl. It's gonna protect you." Jasmine had worn the necklace every day since she was 7, when Nana Ruth finally felt she was old enough to understand its importance. "Your mama wanted you to have this," she'd said then. "Said it would help you find your way home someday." As Jasmine walked to the subway station, the silver chain felt heavier than usual against her throat, as if it carried not just her mother's memory but her hopes, her fears, and perhaps her destiny. The Ashworth dining room could have housed a small family, its mahogany table stretching beneath a crystal chandelier that cast rainbows across walls lined with oil paintings of long-dead ancestors. Victoria had arranged everything perfectly, her grandmother's finest china, fresh white orchids from the florist, and a menu designed to intimidate beef Wellington, truffle risotto, wine that cost more per bottle than most monthly salaries. She stood at the head of the table when she heard Christopher's key in the front door, her posture rigid as a general preparing for battle. The sound of voices drifted through the marble foyer, his familiar laugh, warm and unguarded, followed by something that made her stomach clench. A woman's voice, melodic and genuine, nothing like the affected tones of the debutantes she'd been introducing him to for years. "Mother?" Christopher's voice carried that careful tone he'd perfected since childhood, the one that meant he was bracing for her reaction. "I'd like you to meet Jasmine." Victoria turned, her practiced smile already in place, her arsenal of subtle dismissals ready to deploy. But when Christopher stepped into the doorway with his arm around a young black woman's waist, something inside her shifted, not toward acceptance but toward a different kind of resistance. This wasn't what she'd planned. This wasn't the carefully curated future she'd designed for her son. "Mrs. Ashworth," Jasmine said, stepping forward with a grace that surprised Victoria. Her voice carried no subservience, no apology for her presence. "Thank you for having me in your home." Victoria's trained eye took inventory with ruthless precision. The girl's dress was simple but elegant, probably from a department store but worn with confidence. Her hair was natural, styled in soft curls that framed a face that was undeniably beautiful. But it was her bearing that threw Victoria off balance. There was no intimidation in those dark eyes, no desperation to please, just presence. Of course, Victoria managed, extending a hand that felt cold even to herself. "Please, sit." The dinner began with the usual pleasantries, Christopher filling silences with stories about work, Jasmine answering Victoria's carefully crafted questions about her background with honesty that felt almost confrontational. She spoke about her grandmother, her volunteer work, her degree in social work with the kind of passion that Victoria hadn't heard in her own home for years. "More wine?" Victoria asked, reaching for the bottle, her movements sharp with barely contained tension. As she leaned forward, her eyes fell to Jasmine's necklace for the first time. The simple silver chain caught the chandelier's light, and hanging from it was a small tarnished locket that looked almost familiar. Victoria's hand froze mid-pour. Her heart began to beat against her ribs like a caged bird. The locket, the delicate filigree work around the edges, the way it caught the light despite its age, the precise oval shape no bigger than a thumbprint. That's a beautiful necklace," Victoria heard herself say, her voice sounding hollow and strange. Jasmine's hand instinctively went to her throat. "Thank you. It was my mother's. Actually, it's the only thing I have of hers." The wine bottle slipped from Victoria's fingers, red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. Christopher jumped up, reaching for napkins, his voice concerned and apologetic, but Victoria couldn't hear him. She couldn't hear anything over the roaring in her ears. That locket. She knew that locket. "Victoria, Mother, are you all right?" Christopher's hand was on her shoulder, but she shook him off, her eyes fixed on the silver chain around Jasmine's neck. Where Victoria's voice cracked, she cleared her throat and tried again. "Where did you say you got that?" "It was my mother's," Jasmine repeated, her brow furrowing with concern. "My grandmother gave it to me when I was 7. She said my mother wanted me to have it, that it would help me find my way home someday." Victoria's legs gave out. She sank into her chair, her perfectly applied makeup unable to hide the way all color drained from her face. Christopher was beside her now, kneeling, his hand on hers, but she couldn't look away from that locket. 23 years ago, she'd fastened that exact necklace around her daughter's neck before Isabella's first day of 2nd grade. "It's great-grandmother's locket," she'd told her 7-year-old daughter. "It will keep you safe and help you find your way home, no matter what." 3 hours later, Isabella had vanished from the playground. The necklace had never been found. The room began to spin. Victoria gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white against the dark wood, and whispered the word that had haunted her dreams for over 2 decades. "Isabella? Have you ever had a moment that changed everything in an instant, when the impossible suddenly became possible? What do you think Victoria is feeling right now? Drop your thoughts below. Sometimes the universe has ways of bringing us exactly what we need when we least expect it." The silence that followed Victoria's whispered words stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Jasmine's hand flew protectively to her necklace, her eyes darting between Christopher and his mother, confusion and alarm warring across her features. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" Jasmine's voice carried a sharp edge that hadn't been there moments before. Victoria blinked rapidly, as if awakening from a trance. The rational part of her mind, the part that had survived 23 years of grief by building walls of logic and control, began its frantic work of damage control. "Nothing. I misspoke." Victoria's hand smoothed her skirt with military precision, her training in social composure kicking in like muscle memory. "I was just the wine made me dizzy. Christopher, perhaps you could help me to the kitchen for some water?" But Christopher wasn't buying it. His face had gone pale and his eyes kept shifting between his mother and Jasmine with growing recognition. He'd lived with his mother's grief his entire life, knew every photograph in the house, every story about his sister he'd never met. "Mother, why did you say that name?" His voice was quiet, dangerous. "I didn't say anything significant." Victoria stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor like fingernails on a chalkboard. "I'm clearly not feeling well. Perhaps we should reschedule this dinner." "No," Jasmine's voice cut through Victoria's retreat like a blade. She remained seated, but her posture had shifted from gracious guest to protective guardian of something precious. You looked at my necklace and said a name. Isabella, why? Victoria's carefully constructed mask began to crack. You're imagining things. That necklace it's common. I'm sure thousands of families have similar pieces. This isn't common. Jasmine's fingers wrapped around the locket possessively. This was handcrafted by my great-grandmother. My Nana Ruth told me it was one of a kind, made for my mother before she stopped herself, vulnerability flashing across her face before hardening into suspicion. Why are you looking at me like that? The question hung in the air like smoke. Victoria felt her chest tightening, her breathing becoming shallow. 23 years of therapy, 23 years of learning to function with the hole in her heart. And now this girl, this beautiful, impossible girl, was threatening to tear open wounds that had never truly healed. Because you can't be here, Victoria whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. You can't be real. This is some kind of cruel joke. Christopher stepped between them, his hands raised like a referee trying to prevent a fight. Okay, everyone needs to calm down. Mother, you're scaring Jasmine, and frankly, you're scaring me too. What is going on? Nothing's going on. Victoria's voice cracked with the force of her denial. I've had too much wine, I'm tired, and I clearly need to lie down. This dinner is over. She turned toward the door, but Jasmine's voice stopped her cold. My mother's name was Isabella. The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. She gripped the doorframe to keep from falling, her knuckles white against the wood. Stop. Isabella Davis. She died when I was 2. Jasmine stood now, her voice gaining strength even as tears began to form in her eyes. My grandmother said she was 17 when she had me, that she loved me more than life itself, and that she gave me this necklace because it was the most precious thing she owned. Stop, Victoria repeated, but her voice came out as a broken whisper. She said my mother used to tell her that this necklace would help me find my way home someday, that it had power, that it would... Stop. Victoria whirled around, her composure completely shattered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Just stop. I don't know what kind of sick game this is, but my Isabella is dead. She's been dead for 23 years. So don't you dare stand in my house and mock her memory with your stories. The accusation hit Jasmine like a slap. Her tears dried up instantly, replaced by a fire that made her seem to grow taller, more formidable. Mock her memory? Are you out of your mind? I would never mock my mother's memory. Never. Your mother? Your mother? Victoria laughed bitterly, hysteria creeping into her voice. That necklace belonged to my daughter, my Isabella, the daughter who was taken from me when she was 7 years old and never came home. Christopher's face went white. Mother, what are you saying? But the two women were locked in a battle now, each guarding their truth like territory that couldn't be shared. I don't know what happened to your daughter, Jasmine said, her voice shaking with emotion, but this necklace has been in my family for generations. My mother gave it to me. My mother, Isabella Davis, who loved me and died protecting me from a man who... She stopped herself, her hand flying to her mouth. Victoria caught the slip. A man who what? It doesn't matter. What matters is that you're trying to take away the one connection I have to her, and I won't let that happen. I won't. They stared at each other across the ruined dinner table, two women separated by race, class, and 23 years of different truths, both clutching their versions of the same impossible story. Neither willing to bend, neither able to walk away. And in the space between their resistance, the truth waited like a held breath, demanding to be acknowledged. Christopher stood in the wreckage of what was supposed to be a simple dinner, watching the two most important women in his life circle each other like wounded animals. The dining room felt smaller somehow, the walls pressing in as if the house itself couldn't contain the magnitude of what was unfolding. Both of you, sit down. His voice carried an authority that surprised even him. Right now. Christopher, I don't think Victoria began. Sit down. He'd never spoken to his mother this way, but something fundamental had shifted in the last few minutes. The careful balance of their relationship, his deference to her grief, her control over his choices, had cracked wide open. Nobody leaves this room until we figure out what's happening here. Jasmine remained standing, her arms crossed defensively over her chest. I'm not going to sit here and be accused of lying about my own mother. And I'm not going to be manipulated by some elaborate con. Victoria started. Enough. Christopher's hand slammed against the table, making the fine china jump. In the shocked silence that followed, his voice dropped to a deadly calm. My mother has been haunted by my sister's disappearance my entire life. And Jasmine, you're wearing what appears to be an identical necklace to one my sister had when she vanished. So we're going to sit here like civilized human beings and work through this, because I refuse to lose anyone else I love to secrets and assumptions. The word love hung in the air like a revelation. Jasmine's defensive posture softened slightly, and Victoria's eyes widened with a new kind of fear, not just of losing her son's affection, but of him choosing sides. Reluctantly, they took their seats at opposite ends of the mahogany table, the spilled wine between them like a crimson river marking disputed territory. Christopher pulled out his phone. "Mother, I'm calling Detective Morrison." "What? No!" Victoria's hand shot out to stop him. "Christopher, you can't." Detective Morrison worked Isabella's case for 15 years before he retired. If anyone can help us understand what's happening here, it's him. Christopher's finger hovered over the contact. "Unless you have a reason I shouldn't call." Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. She couldn't explain that she'd spent years trying to forget, that reopening this wound might destroy what little piece she'd managed to build. "Wait." Jasmine's voice was smaller now, uncertain. "Before you call anyone, I need to know something." She looked directly at Victoria, her earlier anger replaced by something more vulnerable. "Your daughter, when did she disappear? What year?" Victoria's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass. "October 15th, 2001. Jasmine's face went ashen. "October 15th. Yes, she was walking home from school with her friend Jenny. They stopped at the playground like they always did. Jenny went to the bathroom, and when she came back, Victoria's voice broke. Isabella was gone. Her backpack was still on the swing. One shoe was under the slide, but she was just gone." The color continued to drain from Jasmine's face. What was she wearing?" Christopher leaned forward, sensing something crucial happening. "Jasmine, what is it?" "A blue dress," Victoria whispered, lost in the memory. "With white flowers. It was her favorite. She'd begged me to let her wear it that day even though it was getting too small for her." Jasmine's hand went to her throat, clutching the necklace like a lifeline. "Nana Ruth told me my mother died in October 2001. She was 17, running from an abusive boyfriend who'd been hurting me. She said my mother wrapped me in a blue dress before she—" Jasmine's voice trailed off as the impossible pieces began clicking into place. Victoria stood up so abruptly her chair toppled backward. No, that's not possible. Isabella was 7. She was my baby. She was— What if she wasn't dead? Christopher's voice cut through his mother's denial like a scalpel. What if someone took her and she survived and she grew up and she had a baby at 17? Jasmine finished, her voice barely audible, a baby she died protecting. The three of them stared at each other across the table, the weight of the possibility settling over them like snow, beautiful and terrible and undeniable. Victoria sank to her knees on the Persian rug, 23 years of carefully constructed control crumbling in an instant. "The DNA," she whispered. We could test." "The locket," Jasmine said suddenly, her fingers working at the clasp with shaking hands. "Nana Ruth said there was something inside, something my mother wanted me to have when I was old enough to understand. She'd never opened it. In 15 years of wearing her mother's necklace, she'd never had the courage to see what was inside, too afraid it would somehow break her connection to a woman she'd never known." Now, with Victoria watching from the floor and Christopher holding his breath, Jasmine finally pressed the tiny catch. The locket opened with the softest click, revealing not a photograph as she'd expected, but something far more devastating, a small folded piece of paper, yellowed with age, covered in a child's careful handwriting. With trembling fingers, Jasmine unfolded it and read aloud. "My name is Isabella Ashworth. I live at 247 Beacon Street. If I'm lost, please call my mommy. She loves me very much and she's probably crying." Victoria's sob echoed through the dining room like a prayer finally answered. Can you imagine the weight of a moment like this, when everything you believed about your life suddenly shifts? What do you think happens next when two hearts that have been broken by the same tragedy finally find each other? Share what you're feeling right now, because some stories touch the deepest parts of our souls. The piece of paper trembled in Jasmine's hands like a living thing. Victoria crawled closer on her knees, her perfectly styled hair disheveled, her designer dress wrinkled against the Persian rug. Christopher stood frozen between them, one hand reaching toward his mother, the other toward Jasmine, as if he could somehow bridge 23 years of loss with his touch. "She remembered," Victoria whispered, her voice thick with tears. "Even after all those years, she remembered her address." Jasmine stared at the childish handwriting, each loop and careful letter a window into a little girl's hope that someone would bring her home. This is impossible. My mother was Isabella Davis. She lived in Dorchester with my great-grandmother before she died. She never, but even as she spoke, the words felt hollow. Nana Ruth's stories had always been fragmented, full of gaps and careful silences. Questions about Jasmine's father were met with, "He wasn't a good man." Questions about her mother's childhood brought only vague references to hard times and things best forgotten. "I need to call my grandmother," Jasmine said, reaching for her purse with shaking hands. "She'll explain. She'll tell you this is all some terrible mistake." Victoria struggled to her feet, her usual composure replaced by desperate hope. "What did she look like? Your mother? Do you have pictures?" Jasmine's phone was already pressed to her ear, but her free hand moved instinctively to the locket. She had. Nana Ruth said she had light brown skin, curly hair like mine, and green eyes. Really unusual green eyes that seemed to change color in different light. Victoria's breath caught. Isabella had inherited those eyes from her father. Hazel green with flecks of gold that shifted like leaves in autumn sunlight. "Nana Ruth?" Jasmine's voice cracked as the call connected. "I need you to tell me about Mama, about how you really found me, and please don't lie to me anymore." The silence on the other end stretched so long that Jasmine thought the call had dropped. When Nana Ruth finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of decades of carefully guarded secrets. "Baby girl, where are you?" I'm at Christopher's mother's house. Nana Ruth, there's a woman here who says her daughter disappeared 23 years ago. She says the daughter's name was Isabella and she was wearing a necklace just like mine when she vanished." Another silence. Longer this time. "Nana Ruth? Come home, Jasmine. Come home right now." "Not until you tell me the truth. Was my mother kidnapped? Was she taken from her family when she was 7 years old?" Victoria pressed closer, tears streaming down her cheeks. Christopher put his arm around his mother's shoulders, holding her upright as she waited for an answer that might change everything. "Your mama," Nana Ruth's voice broke. "Your mama found me in 1999. She was 15, pregnant, and scared out of her mind. She'd been with a man who hurt her, who kept her locked up for years. She escaped when she realized she was carrying you." The words hit the dining room like physical blows. Victoria doubled over as if she'd been punched, and Jasmine sank into the nearest chair, the phone nearly slipping from her grasp. "She never told me her real name," Nana Ruth continued, her voice barely audible through the speaker. "Said it was too dangerous, that he might find her if anyone knew who she really was. She called herself Isabella Davis, took my last name when I took her in. But I always knew she was running from more than just a bad man." "The necklace," Jasmine whispered. "She clutched that thing like her life depended on it. Said it was the only thing she had left of her real family, but that she could never go back because they probably thought she was dead, and maybe it was better that way." Victoria let out a sound that was part sob, part scream. "Better? She thought it was better to let me believe she was dead." Christopher took the phone from Jasmine's numb fingers. "Mrs. Ruth Davis. Mrs. Davis, this is Christopher. I think I'm Isabella's brother. Can you tell us what happened to her? How she died?" The pause was so long they could hear Nana Ruth's labored breathing through the speaker. "That man? Marcus Thompson. He found her. 2 years after you were born," she said to Jasmine. "Isabella had been so careful, never going out alone, never using her real name, but somehow he tracked her down. She came home one night terrified, said she'd seen him at the grocery store." Victoria gripped Christopher's arm so tightly her nails drew blood. "She packed a bag that night, kissed you while you were sleeping, and made me promise to keep you safe. Said she was going to lead him away from us, away from you." The police found her body 3 days later in Franklin Park. The report said it looked like she'd fought back, that she'd died protecting something precious. "Me," Jasmine whispered. "She died protecting me. And she died believing her real family was better off, thinking she was gone forever," Victoria added, her voice hollow with grief and rage. "She died thinking I didn't love her enough to never stop looking." The room fell silent except for the sound of 3 people crying. For different reasons. For the same loss. For 23 years of love that had been stolen and could never be recovered. But in that silence something else began to grow. A recognition that grief shared was somehow less heavy. That the daughter Victoria had lost had lived long enough to create something beautiful. That the mother Jasmine had never known had been strong enough to survive hell and sacrifice everything for love. "She wrote me letters," Nana Ruth said suddenly. "Isabella, she wrote you letters, baby girl. For when you got older, they're hidden in my bedroom behind the loose floorboard under my dresser." Jasmine looked up through her tears to find Victoria watching her with an expression she'd never seen before. Not the cold assessment from earlier, but something raw and desperate and achingly hopeful. "She wrote about me?" Jasmine asked. "About you. About her childhood. About a mother who used to sing her lullabies and a baby brother who used to follow her everywhere. About how much she wished she could bring you home to them, but how scared she was that the man would find you there." Victoria reached across the space between them and touched Jasmine's hand with trembling fingers. "She was protecting you. She was protecting all of us." And for the first time since she'd walked into this house, Jasmine didn't pull away. An hour later, they sat in Victoria's private study, surrounded by photo albums that hadn't been opened in years. The formal dining room had felt too cold, too staged for the raw intimacy of what they were sharing. Here among the soft lamplight and worn leather chairs, the walls seemed to breathe with them. Victoria's hands shook as she turned the pages, each photograph a small resurrection. "This was her first day of school," she whispered, pointing to a picture of a gap-toothed little girl in a pink dress, backpack bigger than her tiny frame. She insisted on wearing her lucky necklace, said it would help her make friends. Jasmine leaned closer, studying the face that looked so much like her own. The same nose, the same stubborn chin, even the same way of tilting her head when concentrating. "She looks determined." Oh, she was. Victoria's laugh was watery but genuine. Once she decided she wanted something, there was no stopping her. She taught herself to ride a bike by stealing Christopher's and practicing in secret. Came home with skinned knees and the biggest smile you've ever seen. Christopher, who had been quietly making coffee in the corner, brought over 3 steaming mugs. "I remember finding my bike at the bottom of the hill behind our house. The training wheels were completely bent." "She was protecting your feelings," Victoria said, accepting the mug with grateful hands. "She didn't want you to know she was better at something than you were, even though she was 4 years younger." Jasmine wrapped her fingers around the warm porcelain, letting the heat anchor her to this surreal moment. "That sounds like something she'd do. From what Nana Ruth told me, she always put others first, even at the end." Victoria flipped through more pages, her movements becoming less hesitant as she found her rhythm in the memories. "Here," she said, stopping at a photo of Isabella at age 6, chocolate cake smeared across her cheeks, arms wrapped around a woman with kind eyes and graying hair. "This was her birthday party. She insisted we invite Mrs. Patterson from next door because she said the old lady looked lonely watching from her window." "She invited a stranger to her birthday party?" "Isabella didn't see strangers," Christopher said softly. "She saw people who needed friends." Jasmine set down her mug and reached into her purse, pulling out a small photo wallet. "Nana Ruth gave me this last Christmas. She said it was taken just before everything happened." She opened it to reveal a picture of a teenage girl with Jasmine's face but older, more tired, holding a toddler with chubby cheeks and Isabella's distinctive green eyes. Victoria's breath caught. "That's her. That's my Isabella." "And that's me," Jasmine whispered. "I was 2. I don't remember this picture being taken, but look." She pointed to the background where a small Christmas tree sat decorated with handmade ornaments and paper snowflakes. "Nana Ruth said she spent hours making decorations because she wanted my first Christmas with them to be special." "She always loved Christmas," Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. "She'd start planning in September, made lists of presents she wanted to give everyone, never what she wanted to receive." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Then Jasmine spoke again, her voice tentative but curious. "What was she like as a baby? I mean, before?" Victoria's face transformed, grief giving way to something warmer, more alive. "Oh my God, she was such a little drama queen. Everything was either the most wonderful thing in the world or the absolute end of civilization. She once cried for an hour because Christopher ate the last strawberry yogurt." "I was hungry," Christopher protested, but he was smiling. "She made you a card apologizing for hogging all the good yogurt flavors," Victoria continued, drew little strawberries all around the border and signed it, "You're very sorry, Sister Bella." "Bella?" Jasmine repeated softly. "I like that." "She hated her full name, said Isabella was too fancy for a regular kid." Victoria turned another page, revealing a series of photos from a family vacation, Isabella building sandcastles, chasing Christopher through the waves, sleeping peacefully in Victoria's lap while the sun set behind them. "She looks so safe," Jasmine murmured, studying the picture of her mother as a child in Victoria's arms. "So loved." She was. Victoria's voice was fierce with maternal protection. "Even across the years, every day of her life with us, she was surrounded by love. I need you to know that, whatever happened later, Whatever she went through, she knew what love felt like. She had that foundation. Jasmine nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. She gave me that foundation too. Through Nana Ruth, through the stories, through this necklace, she made sure I knew I was loved, even though I'd never met her. Christopher cleared his throat. Can I ask you about her? About what she was like as a mother? Jasmine wiped her eyes and smiled through her tears. Nana Ruth said she sang to me constantly. Lullabies, pop songs, made-up songs about whatever we were doing. She said Isabella would dance around the kitchen while she cooked, holding me and spinning until we were both dizzy and laughing. She did that here too, Victoria whispered. In this very house, she'd put on my old records and twirl around the living room until Christopher and I had no choice but to join in. Do you? Jasmine hesitated, then pushed forward. Do you remember any of the songs? Victoria's eyes lit up with a memory so vivid it seemed to shimmer in the air between them. There was one she made up about a little bird who was brave enough to fly anywhere because she knew home would always be waiting for her. She began to hum, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. The melody was simple, childlike, but hauntingly beautiful. Jasmine gasped, her hand flying to her throat. I know that song, she breathed. Nana Ruth used to hum it when I couldn't sleep. She said it was something my mother sang to me as a baby. Victoria's humming stopped abruptly, the room filling with the kind of silence that felt sacred. In it they could almost hear the echo of Isabella's voice, bridging the gap between who she'd been as a child and who she'd become as a mother. She never forgot, Victoria said finally. All those years and all that darkness, she never forgot the love. Jasmine reached across the space between their chairs and took Victoria's hand. It was the first time she'd initiated contact, and Victoria felt it like a benediction. Neither did you, Jasmine said softly. You never stopped loving her. She would have known that somehow. Love that strong, it finds a way to be felt, even across impossible distances. And for the first time in 23 years, Victoria allowed herself to believe it might be true. The call came at 2:17 a.m. Jasmine startled awake in her small bedroom, fumbling for her phone in the darkness. Victoria's name glowed on the screen. They'd exchanged numbers before she left the mansion, both women clinging to this new fragile connection like a lifeline. Victoria, what's wrong? The sound on the other end was barely human, raw guttural sobbing that made Jasmine's blood run cold. She's gone, Victoria gasped between sobs. She's really gone, and it's my fault. It's all my fault. Jasmine sat up, instantly alert. Victoria, where are you? The cemetery. I'm at her grave, the empty grave where I buried nothing because there was no body to bury, and now I know why, and I can't breathe. I'm coming to get you. No, Victoria's voice cracked like a whip. No, you don't understand. I failed her. I failed my baby girl, and now she's dead because of me. Jasmine was already pulling on clothes with one hand, holding the phone with the other. Victoria, listen to me. Isabella's death was not your fault. The man who killed her. I should have found her. The words exploded through the phone with such force that Jasmine had to hold it away from her ear. I should have looked harder, searched longer, never given up. Instead, I went to therapy. I moved on. I had dinner parties while my daughter was being tortured by some monster. You couldn't have known. I replaced her. Victoria's voice broke into a keening wail. I replaced my missing daughter with charity work and perfect dinner parties, and controlling Christopher's life because I couldn't control hers. And while I was playing dress-up in my perfect house, she was scared and alone and having a baby at 17. Jasmine was running now, her grandmother's car keys clutched in her fist. Victoria, stop. You're spiraling. Tell me where you are exactly. But Victoria had moved past hearing, lost in a spiral of grief and guilt 23 years in the making. And now you're here and you're beautiful and strong, and everything she should have been able to become, but she's dead, Jasmine. She's dead. And looking at you is like looking at everything I lost, everything I failed to protect. The words hit Jasmine like physical blows as she fumbled with the car door. Victoria. You know what the worst part is? Victoria's laugh was broken glass and bitter tears. I spent 3 hours tonight looking at you, thinking maybe this was God's way of giving me a second chance. Maybe I could be the mother to you that I couldn't be to her. And that's sick, isn't it? Trying to use my dead daughter's baby to fill the hole she left behind. That's not what you were doing, Jasmine said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. Was that what tonight had been about? Victoria trying to claim her as a replacement daughter? Isn't it? Victoria's voice turned sharp, cutting. You think I care about you? You think this is about love? You're a stranger, Jasmine, a stranger who happens to share DNA with the daughter I lost. And you waltz into my house with that necklace, with her face, with her smile, and expect me to just what? Play grandmother to the granddaughter I'll never really know. Each word was a knife, expertly aimed at every insecurity Jasmine had ever harbored about not being wanted, not being enough, not truly belonging anywhere. Stop, Jasmine whispered. But Victoria wasn't finished. You want to know the truth? Looking at you hurts. It hurts so much I can barely breathe. Because you got to live and she didn't. You got to grow up and fall in love and make choices. And she died at 19 protecting you from the monster who stole her childhood. And I know, God help me, I know it's not your fault, but I can't look at your face without seeing everything she'll never be. The silence that followed was deafening. Jasmine sat in her grandmother's car in the cemetery parking lot, staring at Victoria's silhouette hunched over a gravestone marked with her daughter's name and dates that told only part of the story. So what are you saying? Jasmine's voice was barely audible. Victoria straightened, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Even in the moonlight, Jasmine could see the wild grief in her posture, the way she seemed to have aged years in the space of one phone call. I'm saying maybe it would be better if we didn't do this. If we didn't pretend we can be family when all we are is two people wounded by the same tragedy. After tonight? After everything we shared? Tonight was a mistake. Victoria's voice had gone cold, empty. I got caught up in the emotion of it all, but emotions fade. Reality doesn't. The reality is that you're Christopher's girlfriend, and I'm the mother of a dead girl, and those two things don't make us connected. They just make us complicated. Jasmine felt something inside her chest crack open. Not her heart, but something deeper. The part of her that had always wondered if she was worthy of love, if she deserved the kind of family connection she'd always craved. I see. Her voice was steady now, distant. So when it got too real, when it stopped being about memories and started being about actual relationship, you decided I wasn't worth the discomfort. Jasmine, no, I get it. I've been here before. I'm good enough to feel sorry for. Good enough to get excited about when it's convenient. But when it comes to actually making space in your life for someone like me, she laughed bitterly. Someone from my world with my background, my skin color. This has nothing to do with race, Victoria snapped. Doesn't it? Jasmine's composure finally cracked. Because the Victoria who was holding my hand an hour ago sure seemed different from the one who's now telling me I'm too painful to be around. What changed, Victoria? What really changed? Victoria opened her mouth to respond, then closed it, the words dying in her throat. Because the truth was too ugly to speak aloud, that looking at Jasmine's beautiful, vital face was indeed a constant reminder of Isabella's absence. That part of her, the twisted, grief-sick part she tried to ignore, did resent that Jasmine got to live while Isabella died. And Jasmine, watching Victoria's face in the moonlight, saw the truth even without the words. That's what I thought, she said softly. Well, don't worry, Mrs. Ashworth. You won't have to be reminded anymore. She hung up the phone and drove away, leaving Victoria alone with her daughter's empty grave and the wreckage of the connection she'd destroyed with her own pain. Neither of them slept that night. Both of them cried until there were no tears left. And Christopher, arriving at his mother's house the next morning to find her staring blankly at the photo albums still scattered across the study floor, realized that sometimes the cruelest thing about getting what you've always wanted is learning you're not ready to receive it. 3 days passed in a silence so thick it seemed to press against the walls of both houses. Victoria hadn't left her bedroom since Christopher found her surrounded by photo albums, her eyes red and hollow, her hands clutching the locket Jasmine had forgotten on the study table. She'd dismissed the housekeeper, ignored Christopher's increasingly frantic attempts at conversation, and existed on nothing but black coffee and the kind of self-loathing that felt like swallowing glass. She left her necklace, Christopher had said, holding up the silver chain like an accusation. Mom, she left the one thing that connected her to her mother. Do you understand what that means? Victoria had turned her face to the wall and said nothing. Meanwhile, across town, Jasmine sat on the fire escape outside her grandmother's apartment, staring at the city skyline and trying to convince herself she didn't care. Nana Ruth had retrieved Isabella's letters from their hiding place, 17 carefully folded pages written in her mother's teenage handwriting, full of hopes and fears and desperate love for the daughter she'd never truly get to raise. My sweet baby girl, one letter read, I know you'll probably never read this, but I need you to know that giving you life was the best thing I ever did, even if I can't give you the life you deserve. I dream about the family I came from sometimes. I dream about my mother's laugh and my little brother's hugs, and I pretend that someday you'll get to meet them. But dreams are dangerous things when you're hiding from monsters. Jasmine had read that passage 17 times, each word carving deeper into her understanding of the impossible choices her mother had made. And with that understanding came a terrible clarity about Victoria's cruelty in the cemetery. It wasn't about race or class or worthiness. It was about a mother's grief so profound that it had twisted love into something sharp enough to cut. Victoria hadn't rejected Jasmine. She'd rejected the pain of hoping for something her broken heart couldn't believe it deserved. On the third evening, Christopher showed up at Jasmine's door carrying a bottle of wine and a determination that made him look older than his 25 years. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. They sat on Nana Ruth's worn couch, the space between them careful and fragile. Neither had slept well since the dinner party that had changed everything. "She's destroying herself," Christopher said finally. "She won't eat, won't leave her room, won't talk to anyone. She just sits there holding your necklace like it's the last piece of something she can never get back." "Maybe it is," Jasmine replied, her voice flat with exhaustion. "Is that what you want? For her to just waste away with guilt?" Jasmine's composure cracked. What I want, Christopher, is to not have my heart ripped out by someone who spent 3 hours treating me like family and then decided I was too inconvenient to love. She does love you. She has a funny way of showing it." Christopher set down his wine and turned to face her fully. "My mother has spent 23 years believing she failed the most important person in her world. Do you have any idea what that does to someone? The guilt, the self-hatred, the way it poisons everything you touch. That doesn't give her the right to—" "No, it doesn't." Christopher's voice was firm. "What she said was cruel and wrong, and completely unfair to you. But Jasmine, she's not rejecting you because you're not enough. She's rejecting you because she thinks she's not enough. She thinks she doesn't deserve a second chance at loving Isabella's daughter." The words hung between them like a bridge Jasmine wasn't sure she was ready to cross. "And what about what I deserve?" she asked quietly. "Don't I deserve better than to be someone's guilt project? Don't I deserve to be wanted for who I am, not just as a way to ease someone else's conscience?" "Yes," Christopher said without hesitation. "You deserve all of that. But you also deserve the truth about who my mother really is when she's not drowning in 23 years of grief." He pulled out his phone and showed her a photo, Victoria at a hospital holding a premature baby with gentle, careful hands. "This is from last year. She volunteers in the Yenshu every Tuesday holding babies whose parents can't be there. She's been doing it for 15 years. He swiped to another photo, "And this is from the community center where we met. She's been funding their programs for a decade, but she never wanted publicity for it. She just shows up, writes checks and leaves." Another swipe. "This is her with Mrs. Patterson, our 90-year-old neighbor. Mom brings her groceries every week and pretends it's because she ordered too much food. Mrs. Patterson knows the truth, but they both play along." Jasmine studied the images, seeing a different Victoria in each one, softer, more open, more like the woman who'd held her hand while sharing memories of Isabella. "She loves people, Jasmine, deeply, completely, sometimes to the point where it destroys her. But she's convinced herself that loving people means losing them, so she tries to control every relationship to prevent the loss. And when she can't control it, she pushes them away before they can leave first." Christopher's smile was sad and knowing. "I've been living with that pattern my entire life. The difference is I've never given her a reason to hope the way you did." Jasmine stood up and walked to the window, her reflection ghost-like in the dark glass. She said, looking at me, "Hurt. That I reminded her of everything Isabella would never be. And I'm sure it does hurt, just like looking at you probably also reminds her of everything. Isabella was brave, loving, protective, willing to sacrifice everything for the people she cared about." The silence stretched between them, filled with all the words neither of them knew how to say. Finally, Christopher spoke again. "Isabella wrote about forgiveness in one of her letters, about how holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die." "Don't," Jasmine warned. "She wrote it after she'd forgiven the man who kidnapped her." Jasmine spun around. "She what?" "Not excused, not forgotten, but forgiven. She wrote that she couldn't let his darkness live in her heart anymore because she needed all her light for you." The words hit Jasmine like a physical blow. She sank back onto the couch, her hands shaking. "I'm not asking you to forgive my mother because she deserves it," Christopher continued gently. "I'm asking you to consider it because Isabella would have wanted you to know what it feels like to choose love over pain." That night, alone in her childhood bedroom, Jasmine made her choice. She picked up her phone and typed a message to Victoria. "I forgive you, not because what you said was okay, but because my mother taught me that love is stronger than hurt. If you're ready to try again, really try without pushing me away when it gets hard. I'll be at the cemetery tomorrow at sunset. I'll bring Isabella's letters. You bring her necklace. Maybe together we can figure out how to honor her memory the right way." She hesitated for a long moment before hitting send. Across town, Victoria's phone buzzed in the darkness of her bedroom. She read the message 3 times before she allowed herself to believe it was real. Then, for the first time in 3 days, she got out of bed. The cemetery at sunset was painted in shades of amber and gold, long shadows stretching between weathered headstones like fingers reaching towards something just out of grasp. Jasmine arrived first, carrying a small wooden box that had belonged to Nana Ruth. Inside were Isabella's letters, carefully preserved and smelling faintly of lavender. She found Isabella's grave easily. Victoria had chosen a spot under an old oak tree, with a simple marble headstone that read, "Isabella Rose Ashworth, beloved daughter, forever 7 in our hearts, 1994 to 2001. Jasmine knelt beside the stone, running her fingers over the engraved dates that told such a small part of her mother's story. "Hi, Mama," she whispered. "I know you can't answer, but I really hope I'm doing the right thing." "You are." Jasmine looked up to find Victoria approaching slowly, as if she were walking through water. She looked older somehow, worn thin by 3 days of grief and regret. But there was something different in her posture, less rigid, more open. In her hands, she carried the silver necklace that had started everything. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Jasmine said, standing. "I wasn't sure I deserved to." Victoria stopped a few feet away, the careful distance of someone who'd learned that love could be dangerous. "Jasmine, what I said to you was said by a woman drowning in 23 years of pain." Jasmine's voice was steady. "Sure. I understand that now." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "Understanding doesn't make it okay." "No, it doesn't, but it makes it forgivable." They stood in the golden light filtering through the oak leaves, 2 women who'd been broken by the same tragedy, and were only now learning they could heal each other instead of hurt each other. "I brought her letters," Jasmine said, holding up the wooden box. "All 17 of them, would you like to read them?" Victoria nodded, not trusting her voice. They sat together on the grass beside Isabella's grave, and Jasmine began to read aloud, her mother's words flowing between them like a bridge across time. "I dream about music sometimes," one letter said. "Not the kind they play on the radio, but the lullabies my mother used to sing. There was one about a little bird who was brave enough to fly anywhere because she knew home would always be waiting. I sing it to you sometimes, my sweet girl, and I pretend that someday you'll sing it to your children, and maybe the melody will carry all the love I can't give you in person." Victoria's sob was soft but unmistakable. She remembered, after everything she went through, she remembered the song. Jasmine reached into the box and pulled out another letter. This one shorter, the handwriting shakier. This one was written the night she died. Victoria's breath caught, but she nodded for Jasmine to continue. "My darling baby, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And Ruth has kept her promise to wait until you were old enough to understand. I'm not afraid of dying, baby girl. I'm afraid of leaving you. But I need you to know that every choice I made, leaving my family, changing my name, running from the man who hurt us both, every choice was about keeping you safe. I need you to know that I came from love. My mother sang to me, my little brother made me laugh, and even though I can't go back to them, that love lives in me. And now it lives in you. Don't spend your life wondering if you're worthy of love, sweet girl. You are love. You are the best of all of us, concentrated into one perfect, brave little soul. Find them if you can. Find my family. Tell them I never stopped loving them, and that you are proof that love survives everything, even the worst kinds of darkness. Tell them that Isabella Rose Ashworth grew up and became brave enough to die for something beautiful. Tell them I kept their lullabies alive. All my love forever and always, Mama." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of both women crying, not the desperate, jagged sobs of grief, but the cleansing tears of wounds finally being cleaned and dressed. "She wanted me to find you," Jasmine whispered. "She wanted you to come home." Victoria reached out tentatively and touched Jasmine's cheek, her thumb brushing away a tear. "She wanted you to know that you have a family who's been waiting for you without even knowing it." "Are you sure?" Jasmine's voice was small, vulnerable in a way that broke Victoria's heart. "Are you sure you can handle having me in your life? Really having me, not as a replacement for her but as myself." Victoria took the silver necklace and held it out between them. "When Isabella was 4, she asked me what family meant. I told her it meant people who choose to love each other every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." She fastened the necklace around Jasmine's neck with steady hands, the cool silver settling against her skin like a blessing. "I can't be your mother, Jasmine. You had a mother, a brave, beautiful mother who loved you enough to die for you. But I can be your family. I can be the grandmother who teaches you Isabella's lullabies and tells you stories about her childhood. I can be the woman who holds your babies someday and makes sure they know they come from a long line of strong, loving women. Jasmine touched the locket, feeling its familiar weight against her throat. And Christopher, this doesn't change things between us? Victoria smiled through her tears. Christopher loves you, really loves you, not just as a connection to Isabella, but as the woman you are, and if you'll let me, I'd like to learn to do the same. As if summoned by his name, Christopher appeared through the cemetery gates, carrying a picnic basket and looking uncertain but hopeful. I brought dinner, he called out tentatively. And Mom's old CD player. Thought maybe we could listen to some of Isabella's favorite songs? Victoria looked at Jasmine, waiting for her answer. In her eyes, Jasmine saw not the desperate, controlling woman from 3 nights ago, but someone ready to do the hardest thing in the world. Love without guarantees, hope without certainty, and open her heart to the possibility of joy after decades of grief. I'd like that, Jasmine said. I'd like that very much. As the sun set behind the oak tree, 3 people who'd been strangers a week ago sat beside Isabella's grave and shared stories, laughter, and the kind of love that transcends biology. Victoria sang the lullaby about the brave little bird, her voice shaky but true. Christopher told jokes that made them all laugh until they cried. And Jasmine shared memories of the woman Isabella had become, a mother who died protecting the daughter who was now finally home. When the stars came out, Victoria took both of their hands. Isabella brought you to us, she said simply. Even from heaven, she was still taking care of her family. And for the first time in 23 years, the Ashworth family was complete again. Not the same as it had been, but something new and beautiful and strong enough to honor both the daughter they'd lost and the granddaughter they'd found. Love, it turned out, really was stronger than loss. It just sometimes took a lifetime to prove it.
What moment in this story touched you the most? Have you ever experienced the kind of love that changes everything in an instant? Share your thoughts below, because sometimes the most beautiful endings are really just the beginning of something even more incredible. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one. Thank you for watching this story to the end.